Judiciary Committee will investigate claims former President Trump tried to force the Justice Department to prosecute his political enemies and to help his allies. The New York Times was first to report the committee's chairman, Democratic Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, sent a letter to Attorney General Garland requesting documents related to accusations made by Geoffrey Berman in his new book. Berman was the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York for more than half of Trump's presidency. The Trump appointee claims he then was fired by then Attorney General Bill Barr because his work threatened Trump's re-election campaign. And former U.S. Attorney Geoffrey Berman joins us now live. His new book, out today, titled Holding the Line Inside the Nation's Preeminent U.S. Attorney's Office and Its Battle with the Trump Justice Department. Good morning. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Let me start with you on the news, your reaction to Senator Durbin saying we're going to launch investigations based on the material in your book.
Well, I welcome the investigation. The conduct that occurred was so outrageous and unprecedented. A light needs to be shined on it. That's the purpose of my book, is to allow people to understand the outrageous and improper political interference by Trump's Justice Department in the Southern District cases.
A lot of what you write about in the book was suspected by many people, reported on some of it in real time, but you get into such detail as the person who was actually on the receiving end of those phone calls from the Attorney General. So let's tick through some of those. We can talk about Michael Cohen. You got a phone call asking for his conviction to be overturned because it might impact negatively Donald Trump. It might impact the midterm elections. Walk us through what happened and how unusual it is in your long experience as a prosecutor to get a phone call like that.
Well, the office was pursuing the charges arising out of Michael Cohen's guilty plea. So they were campaign finance charges. And what happened was, as soon as Barr took over, he shut down that investigation for 2 months, purportedly to analyze whether there was a legal basis for it. Granted, bear in mind, Michael Cohen had already pled guilty to these charges. So the idea would be, let's look at this, let our Office of Legal Counsel take a look at this, and if it doesn't bear up to scrutiny, we may have to withdraw Michael Cohen's guilty plea, which is completely unprecedented. And the other thing that Barr did in connection with the Cohen case is he tried to install the U.S. attorney from the Eastern District of New York, Rich Donahue, tried to install him to oversee our investigation arising out of the Michael Cohen guilty plea. He tried to control the situation that way with someone who he trusted, and we pushed back, and that never happened.
So you said this is without precedent. What was your reaction at first when you realized what was coming at you, what you were up against, which is to say that the Attorney General of the United States was acting at the direction of Donald Trump, crossing that line, and trying to shut down investigations, to initiate new investigations that might be helpful to the president? How do you, as a federal prosecutor, continue to do your job with that kind of downward pressure?
Well, like many people who stayed in their job despite their misgivings, I decided to take the appointment and to try and keep my job because I thought it was best for the Southern District of New York and the country. There were about 220 prosecutors, what we call assistant United States attorneys in the Southern District of New York. None of them quit because of Trump, and they needed someone to lead the office.
So the Southern District U.S. Attorney's Office is a legendary office filled with career prosecutors. Was there a tipping point in the office with all of this pressure from Washington, D.C., from Bill Barr specifically, the Attorney General? Was there a tipping point where people came to you and said, we have to do something, you have to speak out, but we can't continue to go on like this?
Well, my job as the United States Attorney was to run interference with all of these improper, attempts to to go after, to prosecute Donald Trump's political enemies and to assist his friends. And so what I did was, I tried to keep the rest of the prosecutors doing their jobs, keeping their heads down, doing the work that needed to be done so that we remained a productive office, and we were extremely productive. So there were very few number of people who actually knew at the time what was going on. And one of the reasons I wrote the book was to throw a light on it for transparency.
So was it ever verbal to you from Bill Barr or some deputy attorney general under Bill Barr saying, hey, let's take a look at John Kerry?
Oh, let me tell you what happened with John Kerry. You know, President Trump attacks John Kerry in 2 tweets saying that Kerry engaged in possible illegal conversations with Iranian officials regarding the Iran nuclear deal. The very next day, the Trump Justice Department refers to the Southern District of New York the John Kerry criminal case. 2 tweets from the president, and the John Kerry criminal case becomes a priority for the Department of Justice.
When you say referred, how did they refer it? By paper, by phone call? How do they do it?
Initially, it was a meeting at the National Security Division within the Department of Justice, followed up by, phone calls. And so, and the statute they wanted us to use was enacted in 1799 and had never been successfully prosecuted. So for about 220 years, this criminal statute has been on the books and not a single conviction. So we investigated it. John Kerry was entirely innocent. But yet the Justice Department pushed us and pushed us and pushed us. And when I declined, Bill Barr did not take no for an answer. He referred the case to another district. Fortunately, that district didn't charge John Kerry either.
Jonathan Lemire has a question for you. John?
Geoffrey, good to see you this morning. You touched upon a few moments ago the dilemma that a lot of people in government faced under the presidency of Donald Trump, national security officials, law enforcement officials, etc. Do they stay with it? Do they stay the course, or do they leave? So I want to get you to talk a little bit more about your decision to stay in your post for as long as you did, but then also you waited until now to come forward with some of these stories.
Well, they wanted me to quit. That would have, really gone right into their playbook, because had I quit, I would not have been replaced by my deputy, which is the normal course of things. I would have been replaced by an outsider who Barr trusted. So I felt it was important for the office, for the integrity and independence of the Southern District of New York, to stay in the job. Now, as far as, when I went public, when Barr attempted to fire me in June of 2020, I did not go quietly. It was an extremely noisy exit. I issued a press release to the country saying exactly what Bill Barr was trying to do and exactly how he had crossed the line. I used language from the Obstruction of Justice statute. So, and it was because of that very noisy exit that I was succeeded not by the outsider who Bill Barr wanted to succeed me. I was succeeded by Audrey Strauss, a person of incredible integrity and an icon of the bar of New York.
Mr. Berman, we've been hearing quite a lot from Bill Barr recently, testifying to the January the 6th committee and in other statements, disparaging effectively President Trump's assertion that the election was stolen from him. How do you, having known Bill Barr and watched him close up and watched the lengths to which he went to try to protect the former president, how do you account for his public change of heart?
I think when you look at the service of people in the Trump administration, you should look as to whether they followed their oath prior to the November 2020 election. Once the election occurred and once Trump lost, people engaged in an entirely new personal calculation of personal interests. So once the election occurred and Trump lost, Barr and others scurried off the ship. But before the election, he did the president's bidding. He undermined the rule of law and corrupted the Department of Justice.
One of the cases you have talked about in the last couple of days with the release of the book is the Steve Bannon case that you were working on, this We Build the Wall, which was thrown back into the headlines last week when he was put into handcuffs down in your old district. What is that case exactly? Are we talking about defrauding people who gave money to Steve Bannon?
That's right. It's a very cynical operation they ran. And by the way, that was a case that was percolating in our office at the time that I got fired. We were very close to bringing the indictment of that case. And in fact, we did bring the indictment about 2 months after I was fired. But that's a case where they raised money for the president's big issue, building the wall, and they promised people that the money raised would go to the organization. It wouldn't go to the individuals. And what Bannon is charged with is funneling money that was supposed to go to the organization to the individuals, including hundreds of thousands of dollars into his own pocket.
Mr. Berman, what are your thoughts on the level of damage that's been done to the government in the past 4 years, specifically to the Department of Justice and the law itself? And I'm talking about including the Federalist Society's impact on the appointment of federal judges, what you've endured when you were U.S. Attorney. What's your level of concern?
It was enormous damage over a relatively short period of time. It was 4 years, and it's unbelievable what really occurred, and the destruction of the rule of law, an attack on the very fabric of the democracy. So, and that's one of the reasons I welcome the congressional investigation that's going to go on now, and hopefully that will shed even further light on the outrages that occurred in the Justice Department under President Trump.
So, Mr. Berman, as an officer of the court, as someone who's studied the law, lived the law your entire life, but I'd love to. I'm just a little too optimistic, I suppose. My wife tells me I'm too optimistic. But could you? We've talked about all the ways that the Justice Department was perverted by Donald Trump for his political means by Barr. But how about talking about what happened with the challenges after the election? How justices, liberal, moderate, conservative, justices appointed by Democrats, justices appointed by Republicans, they upheld not only the rule of law in those challenges, but also upheld Madisonian democracy. When Republicans in the Senate and the House did such a pathetic job of standing up to a wannabe autocrat, it was federal judges of all ideological stripes who stood up and did that. Did that make you proud, not only to be an American, but also to be an attorney?
You're absolutely right, Joe. I was in a non-political position, and my issues and concerns about President Trump and the Trump Justice Department are non-political. They tried to destroy the very fabric of our society, and both sides of the aisle can agree upon that. And I also believe that we have to restore faith and confidence in our key institutions, including the judiciary. And the idea that people are responding in the same way to the outrages that occurred is a step in that direction.
On that point, before you go, I know you're not working on the case, but you do have a sharp legal mind. Based on everything you've seen, published information, reports about the documents taken from the White House to Mar-a-Lago, there's been a lot of talk that there's already, just based on what we know, enough for Merrick Garland, for justice to indict the former president of the United States. What's your view on that?
Well, when I was United States Attorney, I was always frustrated when people from the outside would venture comments and opinions on our cases when they didn't know the facts or they had a very small sliver of the facts. So I'm not going to engage in speculation on that part, on how much evidence have they collected. I will say that it was an extraordinary revelation from the Department of Justice that Donald Trump and those around Donald Trump are being investigated not merely for the mishandling of classified information, but for obstruction of the subpoena that required the production of that classified information. That is a very, very serious charge. If that were in the Southern District of New York, that would have the highest priority, and we would be moving very quickly on that.
Is it fair to say prosecutors have a lot to work with here?
Yes, they do.
The new book is titled Holding the Line: Inside the Nation's Preeminent U.S. Attorney's Office and Its Battle with the Trump Justice Department. We've only scratched the surface. There's so much in there. The book is out today. Former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Geoffrey Berman, thanks so much for being here today. We appreciate it.